HK. If your last name is on this list, your ancestor didn't just live through the Norman conquest. They carved it into England with iron. These 15 surnames appear in Norman muster lists, in the Domesday Book of 1086, and in the charters of the men who took England in a single year. Not peasants, not farmers, not any English village on a hill, land raiders, castle builders, dynasty forgers. And most families who carry these names today have no idea what they once meant. Your ancestors did not live under kings. Your ancestors made them. Stay until number 1, because the last name on this list built the Northern Crown and ruled it for 600 years without ever wearing it. And because genealogists confirm something about that family in the archives that most people carrying the name today have never been told, the man everyone thinks founded it didn't. Numero 15. Sinclair. Today it sounds like a quiet Scottish name. But Sinclair is a Scoto-Norman polish of the older French form Saint Clair, taken from Saint-Clair-sur-l'Elle in Normandy. Named for a hermit saint whose Latin root clarus meant illustrious, pure. The Sinclair families crossed the Channel and then crossed again north. A knight styled Walter de St. Clair is recorded in Norman sources riding with William in 1066. His descendants did not stop at English soil. By the 12th century, the Sinclairs had been granted the lands of Rosslyn in Midlothian by the King of Scots. From that grant rose a house that produced the Earls of Caithness, and in the 15th century. A chapel so densely carved that scholars still argue over what its stones were meant to hide. If your name is Sinclair, your bloodline may carry the blood of a Norman knight who became a Scottish earl and built the most enigmatic chapel in the British Isles. That next name doesn't sound royal at all. That is exactly how well it was hidden. Number 14. Ferrers. Ferrers comes from Ferrières-Saint-Hilaire, in the heart of Normandy, a place name built on the word for ironworks. The man who brought it to England was Henry de Ferrers, a companion of William the Conqueror. Rewarded so lavishly that the Domesday Book of 1086 records him among the largest landholders in the kingdom, with estates spread across more than 14 English counties. His descendants were raised to the earldom of Derby and held it for 4 generations, riding at the front of English armies from Henry II onward. The line fell only when Robert de Ferrers, the 6th Earl, chose the wrong side in a baronial war and lost the earldom to the crown. Even stripped of the title, cadet branches kept the name alive across the English shires, wrote it into Ireland, and carried it into colonial America, where the softened spellings, Ferrer and Ferris, carried the same blood into new soil. If your name is Ferrers or Ferris, your bloodline may carry the blood of one of the Conqueror's own captains, and the earls who ruled the English Midlands from the towers of Tutbury. That next name almost nobody remembers, and without it, there would have been no Agincourt. Number 13. Bohun. This is a name almost nobody outside genealogy circles remembers, and yet without it, there would have been no Henry V, no Agincourt, no St. Crispin's Day. The Bohuns took their surname from Saint-Georges de Bohun in the Cotentin Peninsula of Normandy. Humphrey de Bohun crossed with William in 1066. His descendants were raised to the earldom of Hereford, then the earldom of Essex, then Constable of England, which meant they carried the sword of state at every coronation. The line reached its highest moment when Mary de Bohun, co-heiress of the last earl, married Henry Bolingbroke, the future King Henry IV. From her came Henry V, the conqueror of France. If your name is Bohun, or any of the softened American spellings grown from it, your bloodline may carry the blood of the mother of the greatest warrior king England ever crowned. That next name got softened by English tongues. The original is thunderous. Number 12. Bigot. In America, you sometimes see this spelled bigot or bigot, worn smooth by generations of English tongues. The origin is not smooth at all. Roger Bigot arrived in England as a companion of William the Conqueror, and by the time of the Domesday Book held vast estates in East Anglia, with his seat at Framlingham. His descendants were raised to the earldom of Norfolk, and one of them, Roger Bigod IV Earl, stood among the 25 barons chosen to enforce Magna Carta on King John in 1215. Another Bigod, generations later, refused a royal order and told Edward I to his face that he would not fight in Gascony. A moment of aristocratic defiance so bold it is still quoted in English constitutional histories. If your name is Bigod in any spelling, your bloodline may carry the blood of a conqueror's man who became the earl bold enough to say no to a king. The next name sounds completely English. That was the point. Number 11. Clifford. This name sounds English, and that is exactly how the Cliffords wanted it to sound. It was designed to blend. The truth begins with the honor of Clifford on the Welsh marches, where a Norman family took their surname from Clifford Castle and became border lords, the shock troops of the English crown against the Welsh princes. In the 12th century, Rosamond Clifford, daughter of Walter de Clifford, became the most famous mistress of King Henry II. Legend holds the king considered setting aside Eleanor of Aquitaine to marry her. From later Cliffords came earls, generals, and Anne Clifford, a woman who fought the male aristocracy for decades to recover her ancestral titles and won. Another. John, 9th Baron de Clifford, called the Butcher by his enemies, rode at the head of a Lancastrian army in the Wars of the Roses and became one of the most quoted villains in the chronicles of that civil war. If your name is Clifford, your bloodline may carry the blood of the fair Rosamond and of every border captain who held the marches for the crown. That next family didn't just marry into kings, they sat on an imperial throne. Numero 10. Courtenay. If ancestry could be measured in the quality of the blood, the Courtenays would sit near the top of any English list. The surname comes from Courtenay in northern France, from a lordship held by a family so old that one branch married into the royal house of Capet and produced Peter of Courtenay, whose descendants sat on the imperial throne of Constantinople. The English Courtenays were not that same line, but they were kin cousins to the men who wore the crown of France. Reginald de Courtenay came to England under Henry II, married the heiress of the honour of Oakhampton, and his descendants became the Earls of Devon, holding so long that the family still holds it today. If your name is Courtenay, your bloodline may carry the blood of a family that shared kin with the kings of France and the emperors of the East. The next name went quiet in America. In the 16th century, it put a boy on the throne of England. Numero 9. Seymour. Seymour is the anglicized form of the Norman Saint Maur, taken from a place in Normandy. The family rose to real prominence when Sir John Seymour of Wolf Hall in Wiltshire raised 3 remarkable children. One of them was Jane Seymour, who caught the eye of Henry VIII in 1535 and became his 3rd queen. She gave him the son he had spent his whole reign begging for, the future. Her brother, Edward Seymour, was raised to Duke of Somerset and became Lord Protector of England during the boy king's reign, effectively ruling the kingdom until enemies at court engineered his fall on Tower Hill. The family house at Wolf Hall would centuries later give its name to one of the most read historical novels of the modern era. But the blood was already there, long before the ink. If your name is Seymour, your bloodline may carry the blood of a queen consort and the uncle of a Tudor king. The next name was used to frighten French children into obedience. Numero 8. Talbot. In 15th century France, when mothers wanted to frighten their children into obedience, they whispered the name Talbot. This surname is Norman in origin. It derives from an old Germanic root meaning messenger of destruction. It fits. Richard Talbot, founder of the English line, arrived after the conquest, and his descendants were raised over the centuries to the earldom of Shrewsbury. The most famous was John Talbot, 1st Earl of Shrewsbury, called by later writers the English Achilles, a battlefield commander so relentless that French chroniclers admitted their armies broke merely at news he was riding toward them. He died at the Battle of Castillon in 1453, the last great English defeat of the 100 Years' War. If your name is Talbot, Your bloodline may carry the blood of the warrior whose reputation emptied French villages before he even arrived. If you've made it this far, you already know this is the wrong list to look away from. Subscribe now, because the 7 names still ahead climb straight into the ducal houses of England, and one of them stitched itself directly into the Plantagenet line. Number 7, Mowbray. When William the Conqueror needed a lieutenant hard enough to hold the northern frontier, he did not send an Englishman. He sent Geoffrey de Mowbray, the warrior bishop of Coutances in Normandy, from whose family the surname was carried into England. Geoffrey's nephew Robert de Mowbray was raised to the earldom of Northumbria and became one of the most feared border commanders of the 11th century until he rebelled against William II and lost everything. But the name did not die. Generations later, a fresh Mowbray line was elevated to the Dukedom of Norfolk, and Thomas Mowbray, 1st Duke of Norfolk, was the man Shakespeare immortalized in Richard II, exiled by the king in a scene English schoolchildren still recite. If your name is Mowbray, your bloodline may carry the blood of the border earls of Northumbria and the 1st Dukes of Norfolk in English history. Every proven list of the men who fought at Hastings begins with the next name. Number 6, Beaumont. Every list of the proven companions of William the Conqueror at Hastings begins with the same name, Robert de Beaumont. He fought at Hastings as a young knight, was raised eventually to the earldom of Leicester, and his brother Henry became the 1st Earl of Warwick. From that single generation came a house so far-reaching that Anglo-Norman chroniclers claimed the line stretched back to the emperors of Francia themselves. The modern historians treat those earliest generations with caution. What is not in dispute, for 2 centuries the Beaumonts ruled 2 of the great English earldoms at once, and their descendants married into every royal branch of the Plantagenet tree. If your name is Beaumont, your bloodline may carry the blood of the man who charged the shield wall at Hastings, and the founders of 2 of the oldest earldoms in England. That next man didn't fight at Hastings. He didn't need to. Number 5, Montgomery. When the Conqueror sailed for England, he needed someone he trusted absolutely to stay behind and rule Normandy in his absence. He picked Roger de Montgomery, the surname taken from Saint-Germain de Montgomery in Calvados. Roger did not fight at Hastings. He did not need to. When William returned victorious, Roger crossed the Channel, was raised to the earldom of Shrewsbury, given the whole Welsh border to defend, and made one of the 4 or 5 greatest landholders in the new Norman kingdom. His descendants became Counts of Alençon in France and Earls of Shrewsbury in England. Their name passed into Wales, where an entire county, Montgomeryshire, was named for them. Later, a Scottish branch produced the men who came to America and gave that name to no fewer than 17 American counties. If your name is Montgomery, your bloodline may carry the blood of the Conqueror's own chief advisor and of the earls who ruled the marches of Wales. The next name sounds foreign to American ears. It is the most royal of all 15. Number 4, Fitz-Alan. This surname sounds foreign to most American ears, and yet it is one of the most historically royal of the 15. Fitz is Norman French for son of. The founder was Flexist Flad, a Breton knight who crossed into England around the year 1100 at the invitation of King Henry I. From his sons came 2 of the mightiest lines in British history. One son stayed in England. His descendants became the Earls of Arundel, whose castle above the River Arun is still one of the great fortresses of English aristocracy. The other son went north into Scotland and became hereditary steward of the King of Scots. From that office, his family took the name Stuart, spelled Stuart in the French form, the name that would one day place a king on the united throne of England and Scotland. That means every Stuart monarch, from James I all the way to Queen Anne, and by extension the reigning British royal house today, through female descent, sits at the far end of a bloodline that began with a single Breton knight named Alan Fitzflad. If your name is Fitz-Alan, your bloodline may carry the blood of the ancestor of both the Earls of Arundel and the Stuart kings of Britain. The next surname is the one English genealogists quietly call the greatest of them all. Number 3, Clary. This is the surname many English genealogists quietly call the greatest of them all. There is a reason. The Clares of England descend from Godfrey, Count of Brionne, and Hugh, an illegitimate son of Richard I, Duke of Normandy. Which means the family carries the blood of the ducal house of Normandy itself. The same house that produced William the Conqueror. Godfrey's grandson, Richard Fitzgilbert, called Richard de Clare, was rewarded after the conquest with vast estates centered on Clare in Suffolk. His descendants became Earls of Pembroke, Earls of Hertford, and Earls of Gloucester. One of them, Richard de Clare, called Strongbow, invaded Ireland in 1170 and made himself king in all but title of the province of Leinster. Another Clare stood among the barons who forced Magna Carta onto King John. If your name is Clare, your bloodline may carry the blood of the ducal house of Normandy itself, the ancestor line of the conqueror. That next name carries something even the Clares did not be, the direct blood of the Plantagenet kings. Number 2. Warren. If you carry this surname or its softened American spelling, Warren, listen closely. William de Warenne was a proven companion of the conqueror at Hastings, raised to the first earldom of Surrey in 1088. He married Gundrada, a woman raised in the household of Queen Matilda, whose blood the chroniclers of the day treated as royal in itself. His descendants stood among the wealthiest and most feared Norman magnates in England for 4 generations, holding castles at Lewes, Reigate, Conisbrough, and Sandal. And one of them, Hamelin de Varenne, was the acknowledged half-brother of King Henry II, an illegitimate son of the House of Anjou, which means the later Varennes carried the direct blood of the Plantagenet kings themselves. If your name is Warren or Waring, your bloodline may carry the blood of a Hastings commander and a half-brother of a Plantagenet king. And now, number 1. Number 1. Percy. Of all the Norman surnames still spoken in America today, this is the one historians whisper about with the most caution. Because a man named Percy sat closer to the crown of England for more centuries than any other magnate in the north. The surname comes from the village of Percy-en-Auge in Normandy. William de Percy is recorded arriving in England in 1067, receiving vast grants of land in Yorkshire and Lincolnshire that the Domesday Book of 1086 lists in extraordinary detail. His descendants were raised to the earldom of Northumberland in 1377, and from that seat ruled the entire north of England as if it were their private kingdom. It was a Percy, Henry Percy, called Hotspur, whom Shakespeare immortalized as the boldest fighter of his generation. It was a Percy who married Mary of Lancaster, granddaughter of King Edward I, stitching their bloodline directly into the House of Plantagenet. And it was a Percy who, when the North refused to accept the Reformation, raised armies against Queen Elizabeth herself. And here is the secret. Every one of those Percy's Hotspur, the earls, the rebels against Elizabeth, is descended in the male line from a man who was not born a Percy at all. The Norman male line of William de Percy ended in daughters. In roughly 1157, the heiress Agnes de Percy married a foreign nobleman, and he did something almost no man of his rank ever did. He took his wife's surname and gave up his own. His name was Jocelyn of Louvain, died 1180, buried at Petworth in Sussex. He was a son of Godfrey I, Count of Louvain, ruler of Brabant. His half-sister was Adeliza of Louvain, Queen of England, second wife of Henry I. That is how he came to England as the brother of a queen. Which means the Percys who ruled the north for 6 centuries were by blood, not Norman adventurers at all. They were the House of Brabant, a continental princely dynasty whose pedigree is traced back through the Dukes of Lower Lorraine to Charlemagne, wearing a Norman surname like a borrowed coat. They kept the name, they kept the lands, they changed the blood inside it, and almost nobody outside the archives noticed. For 6 centuries, the Percys were, in every practical sense, the uncrowned kings of northern England. Not because a Norman knight landed in 1067, because a queen's brother married a Yorkshire heiress and agreed to disappear into her name. If your name is Percy, your ancestry isn't a family story. It's a documented substitution recorded in the charters, argued in the complete peerage, and still visible in the male line of the Dukes of Northumberland today. Two founders, one surname, and the one everyone remembers is not the one whose blood you carry. 15 surnames, 15 threads leading back across the channel to the year the world changed. Your name isn't decoration, it's a record. If your name is Percy, tell us in the comments and tell us which other name on this list came closest to matching your own family's. Then subscribe, because the next bloodline we uncover is a Celtic royal line older than every Norman house you just heard. And it may already be hiding inside your family name.